and we'll call that a prop. Okay, and we'll call the fiery ball a prop as well. And actually thinking about it, considering that these objects aren't animated in any way, we'll actually call them part of the set instead. So let's reassign these to set, this to set as well. There we go. And the same for this fellow. Okay. Okay, that's cool. There we go. So now if we look at the list, you can see it's a lot more ordered. It actually gives you a much better idea of exactly what each object is in the scene. I'm just going to call this a light, because you could actually take out the Omni and then you may not actually have much of an idea that it's actually a light. And I'm going to do the same thing for the spot here. Get rid of the number 1 and we'll call it light. There we go. So you can see your Omni, Fireball, light and your spotlight are now actually listed together in the scene. So you know, you can get the idea of how useful it is to actually follow that kind of procedure. Okay, so we've got our Omni light here, and I'm just going to position this in the center of the sphere here. Let's zoom in a little bit. Okay, there we go. I think that's pretty much good enough. And then I'm just going to link it to the sphere. I need to make it a nice sort of fiery color, so I'll just do that. And I'm actually going to give it a range so it doesn't light up infinitely in the same way as the spotlight actually is. Basically, if I had the spotlight and I moved it, you know, in real terms a mile away, it would still light up everything in this, you know, inside its cone of effect. And we don't really want that to happen with the fireball. We want the light to sort of fade out. So I'm going to turn on far attenuation here. And it's got 2 values. One is the inner attenuation where it's at 100% strength, and one is the outer value. So basically when the light gets to this edge here, it'll have 0 effect. So let's extend that out a little bit more so it lights up a bit more of the scene. Okay, that's pretty cool. And I'm just going to make this light so it fades off in a inverse manner. So basically now that I'm using inverse, we can crank up the intensity of the light quite a bit, as the light will fall off much more quickly. Let's bring the light in closer to the teapot and do a quick render of that and see what we have. Okay, you can see it's very bright now, so let's maybe knock down the brightness a little bit. Do another test render. I think that's a little bit better. Now, one of the problems at the moment is that the Omni light doesn't actually have a shadow, so let's turn on shadow casting, and we'll leave it on shadows, shadow map. Let's do a render of that. Okay, that's looking quite cool. Now, something that can happen is the Omni light is actually inside an object, and if that object had any sort of thickness, any faces which were facing the Omni light, the light wouldn't be able to get out of the sphere, because basically it's casting shadows and it's inside the sphere, so therefore, you know, the light wouldn't be able to escape. So let's right click on this sphere here, the flaming ball, and we'll turn off cast shadows on it. So if it did have any thickness to it, it wouldn't actually stop the light from the Omni light from getting out of it. If we do a render now, we've got shadow maps turned on, and you can see we've got a nice shadow coming off here. One of the things though about shadow maps is that there's no provision in them in 3D Studio Max for producing anything other than a point light. And the problem with a point light is that if it's infinitely small in size, and therefore the shadows it casts are always very sharp edged. Whereas in this case we're actually rendering quite a large object really, which is luminous and giving off light. So we really want to use area shadows for this. So in this case we've got area shadows here, and we can go down to the area shadow dialog. There we go, and you've got various parameters there for quality and so forth. Let's do a test render with that, and we'll see what the differences are in the shadows. Mostly you'll probably see them on the ground plane here. Yeah, you can see that as the shadow gets away from the base of the plinth now, it becomes much softer. It's a much sort of nicer quality shadow. Okay, let's set up a view for our shot. So we're going to go somewhere around here, I think. And let's just zoom in a little bit. But I think that's quite nice. So we get a nice view of the ball flying in and smacking the teapot, and the teapot bounces towards us. I think that's a reasonable sort of composition. So if I move the perspective view now, of course, I'll actually lose that composition. So effectively, I'm going to set that in stone, so to speak, by creating a camera, create a target camera here. And whilst I've got it selected and I'm in perspective view, I'm going to do Control-C. And that will actually make that camera take up the position and the perspective of the current perspective view that you're using. So now, if I press P to go back, actually I'm still in perspective view, so I can move around, and there's the camera, which I just used, created by actually pressing, creating a camera and pressing Control-C to actually snap it to the view that I had. If I press C now, it'll take me to that camera view, and P will take me back to perspective view. So there we go, that's quite cool. If there was more than one camera, you would have a list and you could choose which camera you actually wanted to go to when you press C. So let's go back to our camera view and do a quick render from there. Okay, that's quite cool. You can see that because the fireball is up in the air, it's actually not, the light isn't actually reaching down all the way to the plinth, which is probably not really that realistic. So we'll just increase this range here, this maximum range, a little bit. Let's try another render. Okay, that's a little bit better. We're getting a bit of lighting coming up here on the edge of the ground plane. Let's do a test render as it comes in and hits the teapot. There we go, do a test render there. And you can see that's pretty cool. We've actually got a nice big shadow here from the plinth, and you can see it's nice and soft. So that's looking a lot better, I think. Okay, so at the moment both our plinth and our teapot are not textured, neither is our fireball or our rope, so let's do that. Let's actually texture the fireball. I'm going to create a texture here called fireball. There we go, and I'm going to make it self-luminous using color. And let's create a self-illumination map, which I'm going to use a noise map to do. Let's use some colors which are a bit more flame-like rather than black and white. Okay, let's use that, and okay, that's quite nice. And we'll just apply that material to the fireball, do a quick render. Okay, you can see that the actual noise texture is probably a little bit large, so we'll make that a bit smaller, and we'll change it to turbulence and do a little bit of that with it. Okay, so that's quite nice, interesting texture. Now, I'd like the texture to boil, to change as it flies through the air, to give the impression that the surface is alive and it's on fire. So I'm actually going to animate the phase here. If we put it back to a large size, you can actually see the surface of this texture here. And if I change phase, you can see that the texture actually swims through the sphere here. And I want that same kind of effect, but I want it animated when I actually play back the animation. So I'm going to put some keyframes on this phase value here. So let's put it back to 0 here. Just turn on auto key, go to the end of our timeline, and input a final phase value. So let's put in 7. And now if I turn on auto key and scrub, you can see that the actual texture here changes over time, which is quite a nice effect. Quite interesting. Stops it just looking static. It'd look a bit strange if this thing's supposed to be on fire and there's no real sort of change to the surface. So that's quite cool. We've very quickly produced a nice sort of animated texture there. Okay, the next thing is to actually texture the plinths. So let's select the various elements that go on the plinths, and I'm actually going to select those objects there. And you can see already I benefited there from prefixing all the set objects with set. I just selected everything with set and just deselected the ground plane. So that's pretty cool. Let's create a texture called plinth. There we go, and we'll just assign this texture to all the objects. Now, something I'm going to do here is I was actually just put this back to